Hello, folks. This is Troy Galloway, owner of Galloway Building Services, and we really are tickled that you joined us today. A little bit about our company, Galloway Building Services. We are an absolutely very unique company, just like this show that we're doing. I am a building engineer. We do building engineering. We do building inspections from, home building inspections, where commercial inspections. We also do litigation. I'm a registered in the state of Missouri, and soon to be in Illinois for registered construction litigation expert. If you ever have anything you got to go to court for, you got trouble with your contractor, you got some issues happening, and you need a non-biased third party, that's what we do. Also, say if you get hurt on a job or something and you think it's somebody that's poor construction or that's what's happened with you, why you've had this problem, we take care of that too. So we are actually more of a construction analysis inspection type company. And today we are doing a great show, which I'm really tickled to share with you folks today. As you know, we do a lot of commercial and do a lot of commercial videos out there on YouTube and other social medias. And we have a great guest with you for you today in the world of commercial. Jeff Solomon, architect. And he works for or with, I don't know if you just work for him or if you're part owner, but VSP Construction Services. Been around for a long time. I've known Jeff for, 5 or 6, 7 years now.
Yeah, probably seven, 8 years.
Boy, you know, the older we get, the faster time goes.
Time flies like an arrow, but fruit flies like a banana.
Well, introduce yourself, Jeff.
Well, thank you very much, Troy Galloway. Jeff Solomon with VSP Construction Services Incorporated. I am on staff as an architect. I also have my own firm, Jeffrey Solomon Architect, LLC. And so most of the work that I do is work that VSP Construction builds. VSP is a commercial interior tenant finish contracting company. That's a mouthful.
Explain what that means before we get deeper into it.
So I like to tell people, everyone tells you to think outside the box.
Yeah.
I want you to do just the opposite.
Uh-oh.
I want you to think inside the box. Huh? The box being your place of business, because what we at VSP do is everything inside that box. Mm-hmm. We frame and hang. We frame walls, we hang our own drywall, we have our own tapers and painters, so we finish the drywall. We install flooring, ceilings, we install the ceilings as well. And we hire major electrical, plumbing, and heating, mechanical contracting, automatic fire sprinkler protections. We hire subcontractors for that work.
Right.
But virtually everything else we self-perform. And so that gives us a lot of control. Now you're going to say, well, why do you just stay inside the box? Well, don't you build anything out of the ground? And the answer is, if there's a minor addition, we'll probably go into the ground. But for the most part, we stay inside the box because it's a lot easier to manage our workforce.
Mm-hmm. And you get to work year round.
Yeah, we get to work year round, and we don't have to worry about a rain day. If we're not working, the whole city shut down, basically is what happens. Virtually you have to not be able to drive someplace to get to work. But if that's not the case, we're inside working. So a lot of our guys are able to work every day of the year.
That's awesome.
As a result. And our workforce is very manageable that way.
We have so many tenants that move, come and go and change, from, which you see all the time. Yeah. One guy's has a dentist office, next guy has a fish store, the next guy has another type of business, and they need to change it. And you just that, and that's kind of what you folks do.
That's exactly right. We handle the tenant finishes. And what I like to tell people is we help commercial landlords and building owners reduce the amount of time that their vacancies are on the market. And we can do that in a number of ways. First, as an architect, I can sit down with a landlord, and if they need some help marketing the building, I can perform as-built drawings. I can go in and do an as-built drawing, and they can use those as-built drawings to market the space. Oftentimes, with a commercial space, once a tenant leaves, the landlord wants to create what's known as a white box.
Mm-hmm, right.
Because a lot of people have difficulty visioning what a space will look like if it's set up for something else. Mm-hmm. And face it, usually most two businesses are not the same. So everybody has their own needs. So we take down all those interior partitions and we just have a drywall exterior, maybe a ceiling in place with some lighting, but it's generally a big open space, and that doesn't hamper somebody's vision for what the space can be, because they're seeing something else. And it's just kind of common sense. So right off the bat, we're in there helping the landlord that way. But the next trick is that the landlord can then say, hey, Jeff, come on in. I'd like you to speak to tenant XYZ company. They have a widget business offices for their distribution company, and they have some needs, and maybe you can sit down, help them collect their ideas, put it down on paper, and I can do a little preliminary floor plan for them. It's just schematic at this point, schematic layout, but we've had enough experience doing tenant finish that using basic finishes, I can turn around and do that layout, then provide a preliminary cost estimate. And so I take off an architectural cap, I put on a construction cap, and we do that preliminary cost estimate. Why is that so key? Because the landlord can use that estimate to negotiate the lease with the tenant. Depending upon the length of term that the tenant wants, the landlord might contribute to some of the cost of the improvements. If they're going to be there a long time, the landlord's more likely to contribute a little bit more. If it's going to be a very short lease, tenant's probably going to have to finance most of that themselves. But that's a starting point, and then they can go ahead and negotiate. Then once they sign that lease, we can come in and actually perform the construction, prepare the working drawings, the permit drawings, and typically we come within about 10 to 15%. In our preliminary estimate, we come to within 10 to 15% of what the final cost will be. You're going to say, well, that seems like a wide range. Why 10 to 15%? How are you off that much? If you really think about it, it's not off that much, because when we did that preliminary cost, we really didn't know exactly what kind of finishes they want, and people change their mind once they see what it looks like. They decide maybe they want a little bit nicer ceiling, or they want a little nicer floor finish. The one thing that we do, however, whether it's both for the tenant or the landlord, we're very conscious that we're spending somebody else's money. We're not spending our own money when we're building this and when we're designing it. So we're very conscious about the fact that that each square foot costs money. So you want revenue producing space. We will avoid producing non-revenue producing space whenever possible. And you're going to say, well, what's non-revenue producing space? Right. I'm glad you asked that question, Mr. Galloway.
Yeah, well, it's on my list.
So by that I'm saying, corridors. What does a corridor do for you?
You're right. Well,
okay, it gets people from here to there, but it's not really producing any money. You're not able to manufacture. You're not able to conduct any more business, increase business with that corridor. It's a convenience for your workforce, but it doesn't really do anything for your bottom line. So if I can eliminate a corridor, I'll eliminate a corridor. Now, obviously, sometimes you need them, but for the most part, revenue producing space. That's what we're interested in.
I like that. Now, you're saying about 10 to 15% accuracy for your schematic drawing.
Well, let's turn it the other way around. It's 85 to 90% accuracy.
Oh, I love that too. That's a positive thinking.
Well,
But let me to describe to the folks exactly what do you mean about a schematic drawing, and that's my first question. My second question: in today's environment, how in the world could you be that accurate when the world everything's so crazy?
I think the question about schematic drawing, what
that was the easy one.
Well, that's an excellent question, because a lot of people don't understand exactly how much goes into a building or into a built out space. I can tell you, I currently concentrate on interior finishes. It's not to say that I don't occasionally do a building out of the ground. Back in I'd say around 2004, 2005, I had the great fortune of being able to design a religious building for a congregation. And the head clergy for that congregation after the congregation generally approves what we call the schematic drawings. So great, when can we start construction? Are we going to have break ground next week?
Yeah.
Whoa, wait a second. The difference here is a schematic drawing is only, I'm just showing you where walls might go. It's just a very simple floor plan. A lot of times in a schematic drawing, I'm not even indicating where the receptacles are. I might not be indicating where light fixtures are.
Well, you can't.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know,
This is just, does this workflow work for you? Is this something that your business can work with? Do we have to separate? We take a look at the way different functions, and sometimes some businesses, we got to keep Joey away from Susie because they're like cats and dogs, so we got to put them in different ends. I mean, it happens.
It does. It does.
It happens, but there's some concepts that are pretty common. For example, conference rooms a lot of times are used by visitors.
And conference rooms is very important.
Right, a conference room is very important. So you're going to have a lot of situations. If it's a conference room that's going to be used by customers as well as your employees.
Good point.
Or either customers or people that you work with that aren't in your company, you're going to want that near the front of your office space or of your facility. The reason being, you don't want visitors necessarily snooping around your back office where all your hard work is going down. You might have corporate secrets and not necessarily proprietary information that's not necessarily belongs in the hands of people who aren't with your company. And even for those people in your company, you might have certain people that are outside people that don't need to necessarily be in the back rooms. So there's good reasons for that. And then you provide certain facilities that support that conference room up front if you need to. You might have a toilet room facility near there if there's not a common toilet serving a building, for example, and you're in a suite and you've got your own, you might want that. You might have a small coffee bar serving that conference room. It depends upon the level of activity that occurs in that. But that's what we ask about. Finishes in a conference room. If it's a conference room that serves outsiders as well as your people in your company, if it serves the people that you're doing business with, it might be a nicer finish than a backroom conference room that only your employees are using, because that's not, the backroom conference room might not, if we dial that up and make that extremely fancy, it might not increase your bottom line.
And that's where the blood flows when they're
they're
having business.
Possibly. I mean, but you certainly for employee morale, you don't necessarily want it to be a dump.
No,
because that affects things too. There's a lot of things that affect the way a business operates and how well people function. Ever increasing now is the importance of daylight, because it's been proven that if you
lighting too, special illumination,
increasing daylighting, natural light does result in an increase in productivity. And we're getting so fancy now with LEDs that the color rendition of the lamp source does have an effect on the circadian rhythms. You're used to warm light, and by warm light, if we really want to get technicals with the temperature of lighting, the K scale, the Kelvin scale, it's warm light. We're talking about the 2,700 to 3,000 range, and if we're talking about bright sunlight, that's at the 5,000 K range. So why have the differences? Well, because your body is used to resting at the warmer temperatures in that 2,700 to 3,000 K range in light, and you're used to being really active at the 5,000 K. So you want to concentrate. You want your mind functioning really intensely. You're going to have that natural sunlight at the higher K level. If you want a more restful light, you have it at the 3,000 K.
We've been doing that in our office now for the last few years, and I really thought I was onto something brilliant when I figured this out, and when we started doing it, and it really did make a difference for the people in the office. But I got to laugh because I'm thinking I'm so smart. And so I'm telling this lady down at the Home Depot about it. She said, well, yeah. She said, they've been giving these light bulbs to my husband who's bipolar for years in order to help.
go.
Ahoy. Okay,
But you know,
there went the ego.
and it's not just saying increasing work productivity, increases sales productivity.
Well, it's just, in our world, that is work.
Well, that's right. But if you notice, you go into your junior discount department stores such as Walmart or Target now, or Sam's Clubs, Costco, you start seeing a lot more use of skylights, and they bring in that natural light for that reason.
What about sound? Have you folks started getting into much? Not
Say what?
soundproofing.
Say what?
Yeah, and apparently too much. You don't shoot firearms, do you? Because I'm going to get shot if I ask this question. But anyway.
When did you stop beating your wife?
No,
acoustics.
Let me think. We'll have to ask her,
right?
Because it's the other way around.
The fancy word for it is acoustics. Yes.
Okay.
Sound has a
huge
impact.
Between light and sound, you can increase the productivity of your people.
Well, it's not only productivity, but it's just the nature of sound and what's being transmitted through the walls. There's some things you want heard, and there's other things that you don't want heard. So now you're thinking sometimes there are privacy issues. And
I'm thinking more in the idea of that piped-in sound that you would put.
What we'd call gray sound is somewhere in the 40 decibel level. Yes, and that's.
Are you seeing much of this?
It is increasing. It is increasing, and if you wonder why there's music in a store, because that's and why it's a lot of times so indescript. It's just generic. That it's meant in the background. It kind of masks other things that are going on, and so and even there's a science to music. Knowing the type of music that's played influences certain type of concentration.
We used to do a lot of work for Verizon, retail maintenance work and inspections of their buildings all throughout, actually through the Midwest. They are the ones that first introduced me to the type of sound in the background that would increase. They said it was scientifically done that it would increase the people wanting to buy at first.
Oh, absolutely.
And so,
yeah.
I mean, I say that, and and they're a champion. Verizon, everybody knows, and I'm just throwing a cheap plug out. I don't work for them anymore or anything, and I don't even have a Verizon phone. But I'm thinking that makes great sense. So we started trying to incorporate some of this into the office, and then I go into some of these stores, and I'm telling you what, they're so some of these big box stores and their holiday music is so obnoxious. I can't wait to get the heck out of here.
You're saying something, but that's been done as well. For example, drive-in restaurants that had issues, or convenience stores that had issues with teens loitering in their parking lot. Some smart person came up with the idea, let's put on a classical music on the speakers and see how, and they actually were able to drive away.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. I mean,
I think that's cool.
It wasn't necessarily offensive to be there for a short time, but somebody who wanted to hang out there and they weren't classical music lover, and the younger kids had a tendency not to like it. But now that we're talking about all that, is that an area of expertise of mine? Now, typically, I stick with the nuts and bolts. That's and we do have VSP. We have a person who's actually is a trained acoustic engineer, so we can handle that. If somebody else is an expert, I use them. OPE, other people's experience, big term for VSP construction. We don't try to reinvent the wheel. There's no need for that. If there's something good out there, we'll tap somebody else's expertise. I'm kind of like a quarterback. Quarterback doesn't go out and catch the passes. He doesn't block.
That's right.
I'm the quarterback of this construction situation. I design the play, and then I have other people execute it.
Now we're sitting in this room here that's got these colors, and these colors have been designed. I didn't design them, but these colors have been designed to be conducive to study. Now, do you folks do much color design and coordinating when you're incorporating interior box design?
Well, if somebody wants that, we will bring in the services of an interior designer who has that skill. Even though I'm the son of an interior decorator, I never took on that skill.
We need to get an interior decorator on here.
I concentrated on other issues. If you want me to pick a color for you, you'd probably be better to take all the colors that you could possibly choose and throw them down a set of steps, and whatever landed on the third tread from the bottom, go with those, and you'll get a better combination colors than what I'd pick out. I'm a black and white person.
Me too. I'm a little colorblind, so I can't really tell. The police officer, when I run that light, didn't use that as an excuse. but actually, I did use that as an excuse, but he laughed too, and as he wrote the ticket. But it does make a difference. But for me, it's white. I can't even tell the difference in whites. White's a white. But it does make, there is difference.
So we were talking about the process, and we start with the schematic plan, which is very general, and then we narrow it down and get specific. And so when you start talking about finishes, we have a library in our offices where we have different carpeting and wall coverings, and obviously paint color decks, plastic laminates or solid surface samples. That's for your tops and cabinetry. Mm-hmm. People are more than welcome to come in. They can come in by themselves or bring their decorator, bring their spouses. Sometimes spouses are the best decorators. Mm-hmm. And they can pick their own. And we work with interior designers all the time. I just finished a restaurant project, the fourth restaurant for one of our clients since 2005, for the fourth location. For the last 3 restaurants, we've been using an particular interior designer that client liked quite a bit, and so.
That wouldn't be something where we would expect an architect to be
doing. Oh,
you
can. There are some architects.
Are you sure?
Oh yeah. No, there's some architects that are very good at that, and they specialize in that. And I mentioned that I do maybe 95% of the architectural work that I do is for VSP projects that VSP Construction builds. Uh-huh. But the vast majority of things that VSP builds is designed by other architects, some of whom are quite good at that. And that's reflected in their fees. And obviously they charge for that. That's mm-hmm. That's part of the service that they provide. It just happens not to be one that I'm particularly strong at. And you know what you know, and you know what you don't.
Well, that's right. And so it's a question that should be asked then. So when somebody's coming to a company like yourself or coming to an architect, these are questions that should be asked. Do you do this? Do you do the color? Do you do the sound? Do you do, that'd be part of the beginning process, right after the schematics?
Right. That's part of it. That's when you're getting down to the details of what the place is going to look mm-hmm. like. Where I come in, probably my value for the person is understanding the various building codes, which is an enormous challenge.
Oh, it's crazy,
especially in the St. Louis metropolitan area, where we have 90 plus municipalities in St. Louis County. Some of them do their own building code inspections, and some of them subcontract to St. Louis County. So there are,
and no two inspectors see the same thing.
There is a kind of a set national type of code. It's not enforced nationally, but the International Building Code, mm-hmm. which is in effect in most communities in most states throughout the United States and Canada.
I have that license. But not for commercial, but in residential.
And there's a separate international residential code. But what I'm saying with that, even in preparing the schematics, this is almost a preliminary to the schematic, is that I've got to have an understanding of the size of the facility and the nature of who's next door, if there are multiple tenants. Good point. Because the demising walls, the walls that separate my client's space from the neighboring space, they might have to have a particular fire rating. By fire rating, I'm saying the length of time that the space can be maintained before real danger occurs. Mm-hmm, because mm-hmm. obviously there's a delay in response time for fire departments to get in. And so that's just a degree of protection. If you have an assembly space such as a restaurant, and there's an actual category assembly in the building codes, if that's next to a standard office or retail space, well, if the building's not sprinkled, we need to separate that with a 2-hour rated partition. If it is sprinkled, it's a 1-hour rated partition. Depending upon the number of people that occupy a space is going to determine how many exits I need to provide and where those exits should go. So a lot of times I go in and I look at an existing space. The walls are up, but I have to determine if right off the bat whether there's enough exiting. I'll give you an example of where this came in. This is really kind of peculiar. I have a client that has that annually has us do a physical therapy clinic, and the routine for this is I get a call, hey Jeff, we are thinking of going into 1234 Main Street. And you take a look at the building. I go over there, I take a look at the building, and I know they're typically, this particular clinic is somewhere between 2,400 and 2,600 square feet. And so I know what I'm dealing with there, and I know what my occupancy is based on the usage. I know the type of rooms that they want in the space, but I look to see, is there anything about the physical facility that's going to affect it? Well, this one particular site was going to combine 2 existing bays that were both 20 by 50 or 20 by 60, somewhere in that vicinity. And each one had an entrance that was smack dab, a front door in the middle of the space, no back door. Sometimes you need to have secondary exits. If I'm going to have more than 50 people in the space, I need to have a second exit, for example, or 50 or more, excuse me. I need to have a second exit. If people are too far away from that front door, I might need to have a second exit. Those are the kinds of things that I look at up front. You know, what are the existing toilet facilities? Are they accessible? And by accessible, I'm talking about for people with physical challenges, physical disabilities.
Right. Explain to the folks, because I know you know it's going to sound like a dumb question to you, but how come doors?
There's no dumb questions, only dumb answers.
Oh well, we'll see how the answer turns out, because I know how the question's going to go.
Okay.
But as you know, tell why residential doors open in one direction and commercial doors open in another direction, exit doors.
Well, believe it or not, sometimes they don't.
Oh, they always fail my inspections if they don't.
No, not necessarily. If I have a commercial space that only has that's one door, one exit, and there's fewer than 50 people, because one exit means I'm going to have fewer than 50 people, and if it's not sprinkled, that means I can't be more than 75 feet from that exit. Then that door can swing into the space. It does not have to swing out. Typically, in a commercial space, your main doors swing out. Your paths of egress. So your primary and secondary doors have to swing out of the space in the direction of egress and
escape, folks.
Right,
Egress, escape.
Right. Good point. And when you're inside, if you're on that path of egress, if there's a primary direction, then it's got to swing in that primary direction of egress as well. So a lot of times it's going to be towards the front, but occasionally it might be towards the back door. But it needs to swing, and doors can't other doors can't block that path of egress. That's something else that I look at if we're keeping the walls the way that they are. Because you can't, if you have an established path of egress, you can't infringe upon that path by more than 7 inches with a door swing. Believe it or not. So if you have
I did not know 7 inches.
So if you have say a 48-inch path of egress and a door swings into that by 10 inches, we have to change that door swing. It's going to either we have to make a little alcove for that door before you get to it, so that it can swing and not interfere with that path of egress, or we swing in a different direction. So individual rooms can have a door swinging into the room.
Right, that's different.
Generally, unless the room is a conference room and has more than 50 people, then those doors have to swing out. I mean, those are the little things that we
Right.
take.
That's why you need the architect to get involved.
A lot of times I have people that say, this used to happen a lot. It hasn't happened much recently. Oh, I don't really need to have an architect, do I? Because there's nothing structural with there. Well, you darn tootin' need to have an architect because of fire safety.
Oh, there's just tons of reasons.
There are tons of reasons. And
Somebody's got to do the drawings for the permit.
well, but you know something? Sometimes there's some people that say, well, can you stamp my drawing? I have a drawing here that's prepared. So the architect has to actually prepare his own drawings, or have direct supervision over the person who's preparing a drawing, because the architect is responsible. Once he puts his seal or her seal on it.
It's like an engineer. They stamp it. They own it.
That's exactly.
Their insurance is
exactly
backing
right.
you up.
That's exactly right. And I can be in trouble with the state of Missouri or Illinois or whatever jurisdiction that I'm working in if I'm just stamping somebody else's drawing. That is a big no-no.
Now, do you take your company? I know does because you're doing the work. But do you physically, when you do the drawings, do you take it down to get the permits and work it through the engineering department, the building department to
Yes,
get it passed?
typically we submit the plans to.
And do you have
to all authorities?
Do you ever have any problems, which I've encountered countless times? So, but have you? Because once they get to know your company, and you guys have been around for a long time, so a lot of these folks already know you. But do you have trouble with the building department not being bright enough to understand what is happening?
Sometimes the building department has trouble with the architect not being bright enough to know what he should be doing.
Oh, so
I'm just teasing.
combination.
No, we have no problem with building departments. If they don't agree with me, we just go out and no, we don't hire a hitman on a building official. That's silly. No, we actually, I view my work as I'm like a team with the building official. We're both concerned about building safety. And the building code officials sometimes might let something slide that I'll be more demanding upon because I've got my liability too. Just because the plan reviewer reviewed it doesn't relieve me from my liability.
I am glad you said that because I am been in doing a lot of discussions with some other groups talking about that very thing. That doesn't erase your ability or your responsibility. And but now we had a big commercial project. Well, probably not big to you, but it's a big for us strip mall a few years ago. And I'm not going to say the town because I don't want to get in no trouble. But it's just right up north of here. And their fire department, their fire codes were not what their fire inspector was. She was making up things, and the architect they had designed it, and the architect, thank goodness, he was a great architect because they stayed right with us right through the trenches, but we still lost. And we had to do it as according to the building department. Now, what do you do in a case like that? I mean, you just get them to, we had them sign off.
You do what the building, ultimately, especially with fire marshals, because they have
they're the last say, aren't they?
They have the final say, and you know we're so concerned about life safety, and they typically are. I'm glad to say, very happy to say that we work very well with a lot of fire marshals and building inspecters. Yes, some districts are more difficult than others.
You're being very polite. All contractors know that.
Well, I'd say the biggest problem that I would have with a building department would be if they're inconsistent in what they expect. That's the hardest thing to deal with.
And a newbie comes on, and we had one here a few years ago, in town just closer off of our inner highway here. And he had just inspected the building. 4 months later, we had to bring in a new tenant. Nothing really changed, and yet he was teaching one of his employees a guy to be the inspector, and he come up with thousands of dollars of infractions. Oh, well, what the heck do you do there? Well, we called the architect, and the architect says, I can't do anything for you. You know, it passed, and what am I supposed to do? I'm a building engineer, so I took care of it. I just went down and sat down, and we went through the codes. And the crazy thing is, Jeff, is we went through the codes. They wanted me to do something not to code, and but it said right there in their paperwork, in their code, not to do it, and they wanted us to do it. We did it. I just had them sign off and made sure the top, it's person of that municipality, their head inspector said it was fine.
Well, I've got a great example of an interesting work with the municipality. So it happened maybe about 30 years ago, which is pretty amazing for a guy who's 27, isn't it?
Is that how old your child is?
No, they're both
your
older
grandchildren.
than that.
Mine too. I got grandkids almost that old.
At any rate, this was actually an addition, so it was coming out of the ground, and it was a situation where the building was going to be the building addition was a pre-engineered metal building, so we had to order the building in advance. And to try to get a jump on things while the building was being reviewed, we chose to get a footing and foundation permit. Sometimes you can get a partial permit,
right?
And you assume the liability or the responsibility for changes. If there's a change in the building that for a code reason, that we're taking the responsibility. We're pouring it with the understanding that if something that comes along in the design later on, because this is kind of fast tracking the process, if something comes later on that renders that foundation incorrect, we have to take responsibility for correcting that. So we got this footing and foundation permit. We had the building building guts delivered, put on site, and this was in an area. Talk about the fun of St. Louis County. It was in unincorporated St. Louis County, but it was in a fire district, a particular fire district, because the political division, the municipality doesn't always align with the fire district. Some fire districts cover a number of different municipalities.
Right.
One of the challenges,
like where we're sitting right now.
Right, exactly. This is one of the challenges that we have to work with as design professionals and as builders as well. So in this particular situation, I get a call from the fire marshal, and I was a younger guy at the time. I wasn't that experienced, maybe out in 12, 13 years out in the field by this time. So it was about my 13th year of professional activity. And the fire marshal calls me and says, I'm shutting your job down. I said, why are you shutting the job down? He said, well, you didn't you didn't have your plans come through me first. Well, most of the time you go through the city first, or in this case, St. Louis County.
Right.
After you get their permit, we can go on to and get the county, either the fire permit, or sometimes you submit them simultaneously. But given the fact that we were just getting the footing and foundation permit, we still hadn't finished.
There's not much fire code in of that set part of it.
Right, exactly. Well, here's what the fire marshal says. So what he says, and furthermore, you've got a metal building coming up here. He said, in my district, it has to be masonry. I said, what's this? I said, it has to be masonry? He said, yep, that's right. I said, that's in your code? He says, it sure is. Do you mind sending? I'll send you the code. And I take a look at the code, and sure enough, it said that that had to be masonry. There's only one problem with that, though. Fire marshal can tell me how safe the wall can be. He can say this needs to be a 4-hour wall, or a 3-hour wall, or a 2-hour wall.
Right.
He can't dictate the choice of material on that. That's a zoning issue.
That's right. That's where I was going with that.
That would be part of and in the zoning code there was no restriction for the material.
So in other words, they had a code.
So it was in their code.
Could not be a code.
It was in their code. Now, one of the things I take pride in is the fact when I went through school, I took a number of different disciplines, and I took political science, I took marketing, I took accounting.
That's a good idea.
In addition to architecture, because who knows what you're going to need as you're going.
Well, especially, every bit of that.
One of the courses I took was a land use law. Of course, it's like a talk about being in the wrong place, an architect in a law school course. But I learned from that where that the police powers of a municipality. When I say land use, that's a fancy word for zoning.
Right.
And a city has police power, their proper police power for the appearance of buildings, and for maintaining certain zoning districts, limiting what type of buildings, what type of usages can be in what areas of the city, so that a retail area is fine, but you can't necessarily put a nightclub next to a church, those kinds of things. Nor do you put a factory next to a smack dab in the middle of a residential neighborhood.
Well, and schools especially have requirements.
Well, there are various other requirements like that. So dictating what the building looks like, and there have been a lot of cases. Cities do have police power over architectural review as far as the appearance of structures. That's fine. But this wasn't the municipality. This was the fire district that was trying to dictate that. And so I called the fire marshal back. I said, I reviewed your ordinance. I said, I respect the fact that you want a masonry building, but I don't think that's an appropriate police power for the fire district. I said, you certainly have appropriate police powers that you're entitled to. The appearance of a building isn't. The type of construction certainly can be, as far as rating is concerned. You have definite jurisdiction over whether I build a 4-hour rated wall or a 3-hour.
Right.
But it's up to me to decide what materials I have to build that with. And I said, my client kind of agrees with me, and they're actually interested in going to court to challenge that power that you're trying to. Well, I got a call back and say the next day and said, would you mind, you and your client, we'd like to talk with you, my board, the fire district board. We'd like to meet Thursday morning. Well, that Thursday morning happened to be Thanksgiving morning.
Oh.
We met with them on a Thanksgiving morning.
Really?
Yes, and we agreed to a compromise on it because neither one of us wanted to drag it out. We said only 30 feet was facing the street of this addition, so we agreed that the 30 feet facing the street would be masonry, and the rest of it could be
perfect.
It could be our.
See, folks, that's how you do that.
That's exactly right. The great part of this whole story is that fire marshal and I became pretty good. We had mutual respect, and we had a great working relationship.
That's great.
Going on
That's
for
important.
the next 25 years, and because I didn't try to show him up. I presented matter-of-factly. They realized we actually had a point, and we got to it. And what they did afterwards with their ordinance, I don't know. Whether that got challenged down their way, whether they changed it. But I never had any issues going forward from that, and had developed a really nice working relationship with that person. And I'm really glad to say that I've been able to do that with most of the building inspectors and fire safety officials in St. Louis County. I even had sometimes where they would call me and ask me for my opinion, but we would talk it out.
That's great.
We would go back and forth looking at various sections in the code, because even when they would do that, I didn't try to say, that's because you don't know anything and I know more. That's not the case.
No, that never works.
No, it's very much a collaboration.
And I tell folks all the time, and please remember this, whatever you do, don't tick off the inspectors, because they can make your life a living nightmare for the entire, not just that job, but every job you cross through.
You might win the battle and lose the war.
You always lose the war.
I had a situation.
Wait till you get ready to close.
With a restaurant client. And he wanted to use a material called beadboard paneling. It's plywood paneling with very thin grooves, vertical grooves in it. And you see it in maybe 65-70% of the restaurants. This was approximately 2006 or 2007, just after the National Food Safety Standards were adopted in 2005. And this particular restaurant project was the first one reviewed by the St. Louis County Health Department after those new standards were adopted. And the plan reviewer took a look and said, "You're going to have beadboard in there." Now, understand this is appropriate for a health department, because material, the type of material can have an effect on whether on health, food safety, health of the client, or health of their customers, and health of their employees. So that was a proper police power that they had, and we weren't challenging that. But this particular plan reviewer said, "Oh, we're not going to let you put that up because a 3-year-old could smush a French fry into the tiny grooving, and we wouldn't be able to get the particles out."
I never thought of that.
So my client said, he said, "Jeff, I'd like you to challenge that." And I said, I hate to say it, but if you don't mind, if you want to challenge this, go to this person's boss, be my guest. I said, I don't want to do that because I'm going to have other projects with this particular plan reviewer, and I'm afraid that yes, I might, her boss might overrule her on this particular ruling, but she'll be that much more difficult on my next project, and I'd rather work with her rather than against her. So if you don't, and if you present the challenge, you're not going to necessarily work with her again. I am.
Right. How did it turn out?
And the health, it was the supervisor of the health department agreed to that and agreed with us and said, that's ridiculous. Go ahead and use the material.
Well, yeah, good. Well, Jeff, we're going to have to wrap this show up today.
Yeah, we could go on for hours. Right?
Well, I'd love to have you come back.
No, we can do
because
that.
I don't even think we've gotten past the first section of it. But there's so much to what you do.
There's really quite a bit to it,
and we can't get it all. So this is just folks. We'll bring Jeff back, and we'll do another one here in a little bit, and whenever we can put our schedules together. But man, I tell you what, Jeff, you give us a ton of great information. I know that a lot of people, when I do our building inspection, I do a lot of empty white boxes, you call them, and actually there's one store we actually are doing more and more. They come in for seasonal. Can't be advertising the name here, but they're seasonal, so they come in all over the United States and they put these up right at this particular season, and then they bail out, and then so. This is great information for everybody because they need somebody to understand what they're walking into. A lot of their younger people, they don't know what it is they're getting into. So I'm hoping that we can share this show with them and the other shows in the future. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Hey, tell us how we can find you. Give us I know I have your card, and of course I've gotten you. That's how I've known you for years, but tell folks how your email address, a phone number, how they can find you and your company.
Oh, they can call VSP Construction at 636-720-0022. And we are located in St. Peters, but we really work I'd say 75-mile radius of downtown St. Louis.
Okay. So thank you very much, Jeff. And you got an email address or anything, or is that best just to call you?
Well, no, they can certainly email jsolomon@vspconstruction.com. That's the letter J, SOLOMON @vspconstruction.com, with construction spelled out.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Hey, and if you ever need any kind of inspections or you need some sort of white box, we get a lot of these folks, they want to know, do I even have a building that's even worth even calling somebody in on? And they also want to have a non-biased opinion of somebody that's not involved. And that way nobody can, we're kind of like the party that says, no, that really was broke. No, their girder isn't really there. These things, it wasn't that it happened because the construction company did it. It was never there. Give us a call. Galloway Building Services. My name's Troy Galloway again, and our office number is 636-394-3112. That's 636-394-3112. You can also check out our webpage. We got a fabulous webpage, whole bunch of information about commercial building inspections and commercial projects and what to look for, what not to look, what to hide from, what to run from. And that's at www.gallowaybuildingservices.com. And this here our show right here will be on our webpage. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, and we will catch up with you next time, my friend.
Sounds great.
Thank you.